everyone. My name is Shona and I'm Head of Athlete Success and Strength and Conditioning at Coach Parry, and today we're going to be doing an introduction to strength and conditioning. We're going to focus on a few movements just to help you just get really sorted and ready for all the strength and conditioning that's going to get you nice and strong for your running performance. I'm joined with Kelly Miller. She's one of our top athletes and she's going to be the subject for today's session. Alright, so we're going to be looking at 4 specific movements, and the first one of that is called the hip hinge. So the hip hinge is really the basis of a lot of movements. If you get the hip hinge right, your squat, your deadlift, your arabesque, most of those movements stem from that. So if I can just show you first up, so when you're doing the hip hinge, the movement comes from the hip, obviously, slight bend in the knee, and you're hinging at the hip. What a lot of people end up doing when they hip hinge or squat or start a deadlift is they start at the knees and they bend their knees first and they topple over. So Kelly's going to show us a hip hinge as you understand it, Carl, with no sort of instruction to start. Okay, that's not bad, but what we're looking for, you can just stand up for me. Okay, so we want to have a slight bend in the knee to start, so just bend your knees just slightly, not too much, okay, because you definitely don't want those knees passing the toes. From here you're going to hinge at the hip. Right, so leaning down, good. You can see from here Kelly's back is a little bit rounded, so we're going to get her scapula to pull together, and her back you want to have nice and flat. So squeezing the core, almost sucking that belly button into the back of the spine. And then from there, when you stand up, just stand up for us, Carl. Okay, she did that quite well because she's an athlete. So what a lot of people end up doing is from that hip hinge, they just kind of stand up. So we're going to put you back into that hinge position. What you want to do is you want to get full extension through that hinge. So stand up and squeeze the glutes at the top of the movement. Okay, so that's the first step of the hip hinge. We'll move it to an area now where I can show you a very simple exercise that really gets that movement right, because if you're doing it and you're looking at yourself in a mirror, just make sure that you're doing it properly, but we'll do an exercise now with the band that will help us get that a lot easier. Okay, so this is just a really cool exercise to do to help you really get that hip hinge right. Take a resistance band and tie it around something strong and secure. And then from there, what we're going to do is you're going to practice the hip hinge. So Kelly's going to stand here and grab the band, right? So what's really important here is that she's still going to have a slight bend in her knee and give yourself a little bit of resistance. So Kelly, you can move slightly forward, good, because you want to be able to pull this. Then you're going to hinge down and you're going to pull the band up. So yeah, and drive yourself forward. So this is a really, really great exercise to focus on the hip part, so you're hinging correctly, but more importantly, that extension. So as you hinge yourself forward, when you get to that full extension, squeeze your glutes and dig your heels deep into the ground, because that will really help activate the glutes and the hammies. Okay, a nice way to also get this exercise working, especially for the shoulders, because what ends up happening is a lot of people end up rounding in the shoulders, is hold a broomstick or something that you have at home. It doesn't need to be a weight or a barbell of any sort. It just really helps you focus on retracting those shoulder blades together. Okay, so Kelly's going to do everything that we've just learned in a nice hip hinge position, so slight bend in the knee, right, and then hinging at the hips. Good, leaning forward, that's great, flat back, nice and controlled there, right, and then from there, full extension up and squeezing the glutes at the top. Awesome. Cool, let's just do a few of those, Carl, just get nice, so leaning up at the top, yeah, not too far back, good, and hinging up. Great stuff. Good. There we go, flat back, so sucking that core straight back. Good stuff. Alright, so the second movement that we're going to look at is the squats. Again, everything kind of stems from this movement, and if you get it right, so much of your other strength work will be spot on. So a lot of the mistakes we see when people squat are very simple to correct, and if you're doing it properly, it means you can start putting extra weight on the squats and extra load, and really adapting your squat exercises quite nicely, specific for running. So Carl, can I ask you to please do a squat for me without any instruction, or as you think is best how? Okay, so this is the number one mistake that a lot of people make when they squat, is that your knees go over your toes, right? So we don't want to have that happen. So a nice way to do that is if you have someone standing in front of you, if they just put their hand here, so squat down for me, Carl, and they stop your knee from there, and you have to sit yourself down. There we go. So So that's the first thing, and I'll give you another exercise in a little bit to show you how to correct that. Another mistake that people make, so just squats again, Carl, is that they tend to drop here in the upper body, right? So we don't want to have that happen. You want to have your upper body facing up, so your chest up the whole time. A nice key instruction you can have is, Carl, just stare up there up to the ceiling and keep your shoulders back. And same thing, so it's a bit of the start of the movements is that first exercise is the hip hinge. Sit yourself down, and there we go. That's a nice squat. And then lastly, as you come up into the squat, we do that full extension. Yeah, so you can see Kelly's sliding back, but that's because she's doing it right and she's digging her heels into the ground, and then you can stand yourself up. So rather have all the pressure on the back, on the rear part of your body, so don't be leaning on your toes. You want to be digging your heels into the ground. And this sounds a bit weird, but when you sit back, you want to almost feel like you're sitting on a toilet. So the movement doesn't come from the knees, it comes from the hip hinge, and then down, back, and chest up nice and high. So for the squat, a really cool exercise to do to make sure that you're not falling over and also that your knees are not passing over your toes is stand yourself against the wall. This is going to feel extremely difficult and extremely weird as you're doing it. But stand yourself against the wall. Make sure your stance is a little bit wider than you normally would for a squat. So normally for a squat we have shoulder width apart. For this you can stand a little bit wider and you can point your toes out slightly. We don't normally do that too much in a squat, but just for this exercise you can. Then you want to be about 2 to 5 centimeters at most away from the wall. So you want to have your hands on top of each other and just in front of you. Long-term goal would be that your fingers touch the ground, but we start off slowly, okay? So you bring yourself down so that your knees aren't going over your toes and your chest is staying nice and upright, and you stand yourself up and you just go as far as you can. You're going to want to feel like you're falling back, which is right, because that means you're probably doing it right, and that you're not falling over in the upper body. So the goal for this is that each time you do it, you will just get better and better and perform and go lower and lower and lower. Alright, so the third exercise we're going to be looking at is upper body, and it's really, really important for runners from a posture point of view. What ends up happening when you're tired, when you're running, is your posture tends to fall, which if this falls down, then your hips also tend to tilt, and the whole biomechanics of your running technique will go out. So we really like to work on good posture as runners and make sure that we are standing nice and upright. So one of the exercises that we like to do with that is a pulling exercise or a shoulder retraction exercise. Really important if you have a band and you're using it against some sort of stable surface, is the height of the band. So you want this almost at belly button height, because if it's too high, you're going to be using too much of your shoulders, and if it's too low, you're really just going to put a bit of strain on your shoulders. Okay, so Kelly's going to do this for us. What's really important here, you can move over a little bit, Kelly, yeah, that's perfect. What's really important here is as Kelly does the movements, she squeezes her scapula or shoulder blades together. So you almost want to imagine if someone's putting like a note here or pen or pencil, that you squeeze that pen or my hand as much as you can. Really important as well is that you don't want the movement to come out of the shoulders, so don't contract it up in the upper traps. Keep your shoulders nice and relaxed and squeezing here in the shoulder blades. Same thing, don't arch the back too much. Keep the core nice and tight, so pull that belly button into the back of the spine, and then from there you can complete that exercise. Alright, so the fourth movement that we're going to focus on is around the core area and making sure that you're aware of all of those muscles while we're doing certain movements. Again, if you get this right, this is not only for exercises where you're doing core movements on the floor, you really want to be focusing on this through all of your movements, through your lunges, your squats, everything that you're doing. So to start, when you're in this lying on flat on your back, what you'll feel is very often there's a bit of an arch in your lower back or in your spine. So if I slide my hand under there, you can see my hand goes all the way through. So what you want to do from here is you want to suck your belly button deep down to your spine, down into the ground, and you'll see automatically is I now can't slide my hand under here. So Kelly's back is flat and she's keeping that belly button sucked in, and you want to focus on these two hip bones. You can almost try and squeeze those together as well, and now you really have the awareness around your core area before we can do a certain exercise. So what we're going to do is we're going to do dead bugs, which we love here at Coach Parry. So your legs will come up. I'll move out of screen for this. So Kelly, from there, so make sure that back is, or your belly button is sucked into your spine, so your back is flat, and then opposite hand and opposite leg releasing down, and you only go as far as your back or your limit allows there. So don't, if you feel your back arching, that's way too far. So bring it back up, contract, be aware, and then slowly down, and only go so that your back stays flat against the ground. Really important to make sure that that happens, and only go within where your limits allow. Nice and slow, don't rush this exercise, get the coordination right, really important for runners. But again, focusing on that belly button to make sure that it is deep down into the spine. Okay, so we're still on that fourth movement, and we're talking around the core awareness or activation, if you will, and like I mentioned, it transcends into all the different exercises that you're doing. So I'm going to give you another example. We just did the dead bugs where you're lying on your back, but many programs, and we do a lot of planking exercises here at Coach Parry, so I want to show you how to get that done correctly. So firstly, make sure that your elbows are directly under your shoulders. You don't want to be too far ahead, otherwise you'll put a bit of strain on your shoulders. But now when you're talking about the core, you can see that Kelly here is very arched in her back. So she's going to suck that belly button into her spine, and you can see that she lands becoming a nice straight plank, feet shoulder width apart. Okay, and you can see Kelly rounds quite a bit in her shoulders. So Carl, just sort of retract those shoulder blades together. That's good. And the core, focus there, head down in neutral, and you want to hold that position in whatever way that we are doing the plank. You can relax, because what's longer, a plank minute or a microwave minute, I'm not quite sure, but really the focus there is in that core, so making sure that you're sucking that belly button up into the spine the entire time.